WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
We get questions all the time. I know this Dennis gets approached individually, as do I, when we're just talking to some folks. And one of the things that we get from time to time is really about the entrepreneurship. All the elements that are associated with starting a business, and there are questions that people have who have been curious about it. And Dennis, I know that some folks have hesitancy about that, and there's some things that they want to know about. So I know we want to make sure we answer some of those questions, huh?
Yeah, and I think there's a breed of us that love owning our own business, and then there's some that just it may not be the right thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it too also is about, do you have a safety net to get through it? Because as you and I've learned, Benny, that first year or two, you probably aren't going to make any money.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have a safety net, you probably aren't going to make that jump, I would say. But, assuming you've got the safety net or you've got a plan and you think, you've got, and everyone thinks whatever they've got is going to work great. I always say, again, whatever your business plan says, add a year or two on it before it really materializes to what you expect. And you need to be flexible, because what you think is important, the consumer may not think is as important as you think it is. And so you have to be able to adjust and make that flex to where you're going.
When I think about kind of like crystallizing this into a question, what I'm asked a lot about is what should I be thinking about? I want to start out maybe as a side hustle. I want to be a solopreneur. I'm going to do this. And Dennis made a really good point. In terms of how long you think it's going to take, plan on it taking twice as long. From a financial standpoint, if you've allocated, let's call it X amount of money, double that. And the reason we say that is that there are a lot of unknowns that you're never going to be able to know, that you're never going to think about encountering. Depending upon the business you go into, there could be licensure, there could be certificates that you have to obtain, there could be permissions you have to obtain. But in terms of what a solopreneur looks like, Dennis, what's your thoughts about that? There's lots of people out there that think about starting a business with another person, and maybe that's a courageous thing. And, I need somebody there to help, tap on my shoulder to help encourage me to keep going. And I know both you and I really, it's truly, even though we do have people that work for us on occasion, and I know you have employees too as well, it comes down to us as solopreneurs. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, you first, before you jump, understand where your strengths are and what you're really good at, and then understand, probably where you may not be as strong, and then make sure you find partnerships or relationships. When I say partnerships, they aren't going to be partners of your business, but they're vendors, they're makeshift board of directors type of people that can give you guidance in those areas. Because again, a lot of times you're really good at making or building or doing whatever it is you're going to do, but sales may not be your thing. Well, if you don't have sales, you can't build. Vice versa, you may be a really, really good salesperson, but then you can't deliver or implement what you've got to do. So you kind of have to think through that plan. That's the first one. The second one is, as a solopreneur, then the one scary part is it's the word solo. You're in there by yourself. And so if you're coming out of corporate America where you've got other managers that you can bounce ideas off of, create that network of people, of a small group that you kind of get together with periodically just to share war stories or frustrations, and that you can verbalize to them, and they can kind of kick back or challenge you to think through some of the things. Because more than likely, your family, your spouse, friends don't want to hear all your issues and that kind of stuff with the fact you've jumped and that you've got a problem with a vendor, or you've got a problem with a customer. But other solopreneurs will sit there and kind of share war stories and how they've handled, and that can help you navigate through that. And that's one. The other thing is, if you're not networking before you jump, don't jump, because you need to be networking well before you're going to start doing this and create that relationship with people for what I just talked about. But also, more importantly, just to help you kind of grow your business, because more than likely you're going to be working with other companies, other consultants that either can use your product or service or bring you along, and vice versa, you can bring them along to make you more valuable as you try to sell your product or service to your customer base out there.
One of the things too I want to talk about is that structure about doing partnerships and or do I go this alone and what that means. I really think that's something that you shouldn't take lightly. Uh, from my personal experience and from other colleagues who have businesses, what can start out as being something really fantastic can devolve quickly. You have different visions, you have different life goals, have different different ways that you manage. And if you're going to go into a partnership, whether it's 2 people or 5 people that are going to start up this company, you really need to get a clear vision. And I would even almost recommend that you visit like with an outside party. You had mentioned talking about like having a board of advisors to help you with your company, Dennis, and being able to do it. I think that's an excellent idea. And if you can have somebody who maybe you are fortunate to have a mentor or somebody who has started a business and just kind of talk to them a little bit about what your thinking is, it may make all the sense in the world for you to have a partnership. But in other cases, if you can figure out early on that a quirk in their personality can slowly devolve into something that can submarine your business. And I don't mean to take that as a heavy hand, but I say that you're going to take it serious. You're going to put years of your life into this. And if you don't think about this from the get-go, it could really blow up in your face. And Dennis, this is something that I think is a topic I could probably talk about for hours. This is something
and I mean, and again, you got to look at your personality, and if you're going to do a partnership, how do you work it? It requires, the nice thing with a solopreneurship, it's yours. You get to make all the decisions and guidance. And if it's a bad one, it's on you. If it's a great one, it's on you. You get it. If it's a partnership, you may not 100% agree with where the partner wants to go with this. And if you do have a partner, you've got to document how you're going to work and make decisions, because you could easily start out as friends and quickly become not best of friends in the process. The other part as a solopreneur, to think about, because you're starting out and you're gung ho, you've also got to think about at the end, and Benny and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago about the finish line. You got to be thinking about that finish line. What happens when you're a solopreneur? Because, if you're young, you're probably not thinking about retiring, definitely not thinking about dying, but something could happen along the way. And so what happens to that business if you go away? And especially if you have spouse and children involved, how do you make sure that they're provided for and taken care of? And so you've got to talk through, accountants, attorneys, insurance, all that kind of stuff that doesn't really help grow the business, but you got to have it because it's that safety net that I talked about earlier on that you've got to have in place to navigate and help you do the things you need to do.
Yeah, you actually got me thinking on a topic that just kind of flooded my head there. I knew of a friend of mine at the time. He was in his early 30s, and his business partner was in his late 60s because he was an expert in the field. What he hadn't counted on 10 years into the business was that this guy wanted to retire. I mean, he was like in his mid 70s, and my buddy was just not even in his 40s yet. So that really complicated that particular structure, not only in terms of, well, exactly what you were just talking about, Dennis, in terms of the exit, but in terms of, wait a second, he is really the brain trust for me here. And I got to replace that brain trust. And it really caused him to scramble. And those are things that you really need to think about. If you all are around the same age and, you're young and you're single, hey, that's great. But what happens 10 years down the road when you're married and you start having kids? What do those things look like? Those are things that we just don't think about when we're 20 years old, Dennis.
Also, you get into it. I've got a friend that has a kind of a partnership business. And one of them is kind of more of thinking, hey, I got to work 8 to 5 or whatever it takes. The other one has kind of said, I'll just kind of wander in at 11 o'clock and take a long lunch and then wander out. They've got some problems going on. And so it's like, how do you navigate that? When you're a solopreneur, you're working it, you do it, you can do whatever you need to. When you get that partnership, there are some things that you don't have the control in. So there's some challenges there. The other one, Benny, I know when I was getting ready to start, people, always the war stories, what are you going to do for health insurance?
Yep.
And I think I was shocked. That was the biggest one people were really concerned about. Quickly got out. One, there's definitely insurance in today's world. When I started 14 years ago, more companies probably paid for your health insurance and you didn't pay much as an employee. Today, I think many of us pay quite a bit for our health insurance, even if you were for a company. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that changed. But then as you got out here, you found out there's ways to find good insurance to cover the health part of you and your family. Now, I would say it's there for the catastrophic. It's not there for the sniffle and the runny nose and some of the basic stuff. Mm-hmm. But you're able to, find those ways to get that health care to cover that catastrophic if needed. And there's some that are your typical insurance. They're not cheap, but they're doable. Mm-hmm. There's, because the government's involved in the healthcare sector now, they have insurance in a roundabout. Mm-hmm. There's many of these organizations that have, one of them's called MediShare. There's other ones out there that it's really health cost sharing. It's not classified as insurance.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, Dennis, because I think this is something, and maybe you should really talk about this maybe as a subject on its own, but this is something that I think has picked up a lot of momentum. I know it kind of started out in the faith-based type of side of the world. And this was something that you got involved in. I found this to be really interesting. And I know very little bit about it. Can maybe talk a little bit about that?
So, it's been 8 years ago. So I was 4 or 5 years into the business. And one of my consultants that I worked with, she was an HR specialist. And mm-hmm. I was talking to her one day because I think at the time we had Blue Cross Blue Shield. And, there were 3 of us. It was my wife, myself, and a daughter at the time, that we were paying like $900 to $1,000 a month for insurance. And she's like, there's this thing called MediShare, and there's other ones. This is the one we use, mm-hmm. that you can get, and the cost is much, much lower. And I mean, literally at the time, it went from $1,200 a month to, I think we were paying $300 a month. Mm-hmm. And so it's not classified as insurance. When we first started, many doctors didn't accept it. Today, I'd say everywhere we go, everybody is aware of MediShare or companies like it, mm-hmm. That help navigate through it. The piece they do is they're basically, they call it sharing of cost instead of insurance, which is really mm-hmm. what insurance is. Yep. And then they just kind of help you navigate and ask lots more questions than insurance companies. So as an example, one time, one of us needed some surgery. If you went to the hospital, it was going to be $60,000. If you paid cash at the hospital, it was $30,000. And if you did the surgery at an outpatient, it was $11,000. And so we chose to do it at the outpatient. And then MediShare paid the whole thing. We didn't have to pay a dime because they were going to have to pay the 60 minus whatever our deductible was. And the deductibles are high. So, it's like $10,000 a year deductible. But again, it's there for the catastrophic. And because they have these other ways around it, you end up not spending nearly the amount for healthcare that you would think as a business owner.
I think the point in terms of like what this program offers, it gives you an alternative to consider. If the reason you're not going to start your business is solely because of healthcare, you're worried about medical costs, maybe you have a health condition, this is something that Dennis had mentioned what they started out with. He also, we talked a little bit about government plans and talked to health insurance providers and really have those discussions, see what it looks like. For those of us who are maybe fortunate to have a spouse that is working, certainly that makes it a lot easier. I know we're not all in that situation. Maybe if you're young enough, until age 26, I think it is, Dennis, that you're able to be on your parents' insurance plan until age 26. Those are things that you should try to take advantage of, but don't let it stop you, because to Dennis's point, there are things you can do. And if you're worried about, I call it bankruptcy protection is really what a lot of insurance is. It's really to stop you from getting into a really bad situation. Sometimes if you want all the luxury bells and whistles, you're going to pay for that. There's no way around it. But if you can kind of make do with, visiting your primary care and paying out of pocket, and you don't mind having a high deductible, and especially if you're young and you've got some, a little bit of time before you have any major things coming up. These are things that I would definitely consider. So don't let that stop you. There's just too much out there, Dennis, right?
Exactly. So definitely talk to people and look, insurance brokers are a good one. There's all kinds of different people out there and different, especially you can go to ChatGPT and type it in, and it's amazing. It'll come up and tell you some suggestions. So highly recommend.
I've converted you. I just want to make that point.
I'm an AI fan now. The other piece is, again, make sure you've got your plan in place, talk to people, network, make sure you've kind of thought through it before you jump. Make sure that you've got a plan and you've got money saved up to help get you through the 2 years. Does not mean it has to be enough to live off of how you live today, but realize you need to be a little more cost conscious for those first couple years. And then the last one, and we've talked about this numerous times, is have KPIs set up or key milestones that you're watching along the path to see that you're hitting those targets. And if you're not, you need to ask yourself, hey, what went wrong or what's not working? And if you're missing them, but not by much, it's like, okay, then you need to adjust the KPIs or whatever. But if your goal is to make it up, close 3 deals by the end of the first year and you've closed none, you need to ask yourself, what's going on? Do you even have any prospects that can close? Because if not, either you need to adjust what you're doing, or you do probably need to get back in the workforce and get out of being a solopreneur at that point. But as long as you're doing things along the way and you see that you've got gradual improvement, it's going to allow you to experience what being a solopreneur is, which I say it's like democracy and communism. Once you get over here, you're not going back to the other way, probably, because the freedom of owning your own business is pretty refreshing and gives you so much more avenues to do things that you just don't realize coming out of corporate America that you couldn't do. But now I'll plug the corporate America side. The part that it helped me to be a solopreneur is all that experience and knowledge and all those things that make me more valuable with the people that I interact with. I could not have done that by just coming straight out of college. So,
and the connections too, as well.
Exactly. All the networks and all the connections and things. You wouldn't be hearing this podcast if I wasn't in corporate America, because Benny and I,
we would know each other
when we were both in corporate America. So
that's right.
There's corporate America, you need it. But there's a lot of us that do really, really well as an entrepreneur, and that you can do all kinds of neat stuff. And especially today's with all the automation and all the other stuff out there, you can act like a big company without having a staff of hundreds of people to do all the stuff that you do.
And along what you were saying too, as well, you've got a new ally in your back pocket. And Dennis mentioned it, we mentioned ChatGPT, but artificial intelligence, there's lots of other artificial intelligence out there. Run your ideas, run some things like ideas that you have for a business, run it through AI. Let that help that vet it out for you. Have it address some concerns. The idea here is that unless you are just absolutely just playing around with the idea, and you really want to, or if you really want to go and start your own business, you're going to have to take that jump. And there's never, ever going to be a perfect situation unless you hit the lottery and then suddenly you're flush with cash, and then you can go ahead and start that consulting business. And that's probably not going to happen to most of us out there. But if you go and you can at least, establish some parameters and you understand guidelines and how this can work, the risks become fewer. I think that Dennis and I, we always, we can never tell people when it's the right time for them. You're going to have to make that judgment call yourself. But if you're at least moving in that direction, it's the right thing. Dennis, I know that people are going to have more questions for us, and they might have some things that they want to ask you. If people want to get a hold of you, Dennis, what's the best way for them to be able to get in touch with you?
Yeah, a couple of ways. I mean, email's the best, probably. DennisJ@worksolution.com. That's DennisJ@works, Or I'm on LinkedIn is another way. And the LinkedIn could be personal or through the WFH with 2 guys. And just put a note in there and it'll pop up and ping Benny or I. Benny, how about you?
Yep. Same thing. You can get a hold of me. My email is Benny, BENNY @velocitytechnology.group. velocitytechnology.group. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and also visit our website too, wfh2guys.com. You'll get to see all of our past podcasts, and you can drop notes to us and let us know what's going on. But we're going to continue this. I think there are a lot of questions that we get all the time, and we want to make sure we answer that as best we can for you. So yeah, thanks for stopping by today, and we'll see you on our next podcast.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.